All right, so let's start this broadcast with the big story that we are tracking on WION at this hour. And this is an interesting and important development that is coming out of the recently concluded BRICS summit in Johannesburg in South Africa. The Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President Xi Jinping reportedly held a brief interaction on the sidelines of the three-day meeting which was held in South Africa's Johannesburg. Remember, this was, of course, something that was speculated upon for quite some time. Will there be a pull aside? Will the two leaders talk to each other? Now, according to an official statement from India's Foreign Secretary, the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping discussed issues such as the border standoff and the line of actual control. Now, both leaders have agreed to direct officials for expediting the disengagement and de-escalation process at the border along the eastern Ladakh region.
On the sidelines of the BRICS summit, Prime Minister had interaction with other BRICS leaders. And in that conversation with President Xi Jinping, Prime Minister highlighted India's concerns at the unresolved issues along the LAC in the western sector of the India-China border areas.
Now, this development is being touted as a major breakthrough. For several years now, the military tussle between the two nations has been a flashpoint of contention. The 2020 Galwan clashes, in which 20 Indian soldiers ended up losing their lives, had triggered a diplomatic standoff with Beijing. Moreover, China's increasing military and infrastructural presence along the LAC has also been a major cause of national security concern for India. And the latest development has come a week after India and China had held their 19th round of military talks to try and diffuse the tensions. Now, so far, the ongoing talks between both the armies have not resulted in a substantial outcome. And for more on this, we're being joined in by our correspondent Calden Ongmu, who is in fact joining us live from Johannesburg. And we're also joined by Dr. Srikant Kondapalli, who's a professor of Chinese studies at Jawaharlal Nehru University. He's joining us live from New Delhi. But Calden, let me in fact begin with you. Now, there was a lot of speculation, and this is what we've been talking about for quite some time now, in the last 2 days. Will the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President Xi Jinping have a one-on-one conversation? That is precisely what seems to have happened, where the two leaders have touched upon the most contentious issue that has severed ties between the two nations, and this is the standoff at India's border with China.
Mohammed, as you clearly stated yourself, this was one of the most awaited, issue or the meetings that everybody was talking about from day one of the BRICS summit. In fact, everybody, the question on everyone's mind, whether you're Chinese or whether you're an Indian, everybody wanted to know whether Chinese President Xi Jinping or India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be having a bilateral meeting or not. And as clearly as crisp you can be, India's Foreign Minister just a while ago, when he was briefing the media, stated very carefully, saying that both the leaders did meet, but it was not a formal sit-down meeting. It was not a bilateral meeting. They met, they had a communication, and they said two things very clear. He said two things very clearly. One, he said India's Prime Minister Modi communicated to Chinese President Xi Jinping about the concern of the line of actual control. And second, what you just read in your read there, Mohammed, talking about how this is only from the Indian officials, mind you, and not from the Chinese side. Indian officials are stating that both the leaders have directed the officials to expedite the process in the border of LAC. So, currently as we are here, we are awaiting Prime Minister Narendra Modi's entry into the Sun Hotel here, right next to the BRICS summit venue. We are told that he will be leaving the country around 7:30 South African time. He will be leaving for Greece. Just as the first day when Indian diaspora had come to support him, they are here back again. There are at least 100 or 150 of them come to thank Modi. We are told, some of the officials have said that Prime Minister Modi will be taking some photographs with the officials that have arranged this whole meeting with the diaspora. After that, from here, he will be leaving straight for Greece. Mohammed?
Absolutely, indeed. Calden, do continue to stay on with us. Let me now bring in Dr. Srikanth Kondapalli, who's joining us from New Delhi. Now, Dr. Kondapalli, this of course was such an important and innovative meeting, and the information that has come out in terms of the words that were exchanged between the Indian Prime Minister and the Chinese President is that in the interaction that they had on the sidelines of the BRICS summit, the two leaders have spoken to each other about the border standoff at the line of actual control. Now, this has been the biggest and the major sore point between the two nations. What do you make of this interaction, sir?
Well, the details are still not available. The Foreign Secretary mentioned about the expeditious disengagement and de-escalation process to be carried on in the border areas. That is what seems to have been the discussion between the Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping, as you also mentioned. However, the Chinese side has not given any information regarding this informal meeting as of now. So let us see what the details are and if both the leaders are formally meeting in the bylines of the 15th BRICS meeting, number one. Number two, the issue as such is very serious, as on June 17th, 2020, after 2 days of the skirmishes on the border, Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar mentioned about peace and tranquility essential for restoration of the normalization of relations between the two countries, peace and tranquility on the border areas. So if that has not happened in the last 3 years, more than 3 years, then that is a prerequisite for the bilateral relations to be improved. So the Prime Minister's formal conversation has highlighted about that issue. Now, we have not had any bilateral relations so far, except for the meetings at the multilateral level, like the Bali, or other meetings like the NSA, Mr. Ajit Doval, in terms of meeting with Wang Yi, the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Commission, or in terms of Dr. Jaishankar's meeting with Wang Yi in Southeast Asia. Except for these and WMCC meetings and 19 Corps Commander level meetings, we have not had any bilateral relations. So that signifies that we need to talk, the leaders need to talk to each other.
Absolutely, indeed. I think that is what needs to be taken away with that interaction between the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Thank you very much indeed to both Kaldan Angbu and also to Dr. Srikanth Kondapalli for joining us and getting us those insights. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.